Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of the Trail Talk High Pointing podcast. So this week's episode is part of the Community Spotlight series that I'm doing, where I highlight organizations that use the outdoors as part of their mission to improve the lives of others. And this week I had the privilege of speaking with Nathan Perrault and Colton Ducken of Veterans Expeditions, which I also call VetEx throughout the episode. Now, VetEx takes armed forces veterans into the outdoors on expeditions to enhance their lives and strengthen the community of veterans throughout the country. And I found out about this organization through Austin Hartman from episode 23, where I spoke with Austin and Nicole about living in a van and traveling the country while high pointing. And Austin is a Marine Corps vet, and he told me that he got involved with VetEx a few years ago when he signed up for a backpacking trip with them in Utah. And he later connected Nathan and I, and I'm very grateful that we were able to put this episode together and feature this great organization. In the show notes, you can find more information on how to get involved with VetEx. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast if you're an audio listener, and to the YouTube channel if you like watching these interviews. So thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Veterans Expeditions. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk High Pointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and today we're speaking with Nathan Perrault from Veterans Expeditions. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Lauren. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, this is cool. So Nathan is the field director of Veterans Expeditions. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your military background before we get into what you do for the organization?
Sure. Yeah, I graduated high school in 2007 in Maryland, and enlisted in the Marine Corps as an infantryman, just your basic rifleman. And went to Iraq once and Afghanistan once with 2-9. And yeah, did my 4-year contract and got out in 2011. So after I got discharged from the military, I wanted to move west and play outside as much as I could, and landed on Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, and found a really good group of vets at the university and friends, and found, the proximity to the mountains there was great, so I was able to go out and play a lot and learn a lot through mentors of mine.
So were you a client with Veterans Expeditions before you started working for the organization?
Yeah. So in 2013, Colorado got some really bad floods, and I did some volunteering with Team Rubicon, which is another veteran organization that does natural disaster relief. So while we were just cleaning out people's houses from mud and demoing all the water damage and stuff, one of the ladies that I was just working by said, if you like climbing, you should check out Veterans Expeditions. And I looked up their schedule online and saw an ice climbing trip in Ouray, Colorado. So signed up for the trip and went out to go and see what it was like. I think this is kind of a funny story because it happens so frequently. I went with a buddy of mine, Derek, who was an 82nd vet, and we always have we had an excuse ready if the organization was lame, we're gonna go, hang out for the day, and then we got to go for whatever reason. And a lot of people come in with that mentality, if this is going to be a boring trip, then I'm gonna bail early and I'll have an excuse at the ready to get out of it. But we ended up staying longer than we were originally planning to, anyways, to just keep climbing ice and hanging out with the group.
So you didn't need to use the excuse. That's always good.
No. No, we had to use an excuse to our friends that we were going to go hang out with to miss hanging out going with them for Super Bowl weekend, and we stayed to ice climb more and watch the Super Bowl with everyone at the hotel rooms in Ouray.
Oh, awesome. So did Veterans Expeditions teach you guys how to ice climb, or did you go there knowing already?
Yeah, I had done a tiny bit of rock climbing at that point, and could build some anchors at the top and belay, but the volunteers and the executive director had to teach me how to do everything within the ice climbing technique, and yeah, so I was a total newbie. That was my first time ever ice climbing, and just had an absolute blast doing it. And it's my favorite hobby now.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys still do that ice climbing trip?
We pivoted from Ouray, Colorado to Lake City, Colorado.
Okay.
Lake City has another kind of man-made ice park where they spray water over the edges of cliffs and it freezes. And
Yeah.
um, the Ouray one is pretty classic and incredible, but um, it's just gotten so busy over the last couple of years that we moved to Lake City and like that ice park more. It's a lot more quiet.
For sure. Yeah. It's gained a ton of popularity recently.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. Right. How did Veterans Expeditions get started?
Yeah, so Nick Watson and Stacy Bear started it in 2010, and they got some little bit of funding to run like one-off trip, and the feedback that they got from those vets was like, we need to do this again. Like, what, this needs to be a regular thing. Just I think it brought that group of vets together so closely by suffering a little bit in the mountains, and this is before my time, so I was active duty and at the time, and I'm just hearing this stuff all by getting to know the organization, but
Mm-hmm.
they got some strong feedback that we need to get together again, and so Nick just started to really work on schedule, and can I get more trips out, and here let's get this together and let's set this big goal of climbing Denali. And for several years he was just working towards getting a group of vets up Denali, and then I was able to enter in like right at the perfect time for that, and where the funding and the sponsorship from companies was right, and
Yeah.
I think being a National Geographic Adventurer of the Year helped quite a bit with kind of giving some validity
Mm-hmm.
from the public about the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just some kind of small dinky organization. After that, kind of put us on the map. And when I got involved, I was just like, how can I help Nick? And he said, yeah, run some trips. And I started volunteering in 2014. Well, more like 2015 after Denali, but we went from running like 15 to 20 trips a year to 40 to 50 trips a year pretty quickly, with throwing a few volunteers and saying, hey, let's go, put this on the schedule, a rock climbing trip here and a rock climbing trip there and ice climbing here and whatever. And, I was able to donate a lot of my time to kind of pay it forward with the organization. And yeah, we're running around 40 trips a year, and we get about 500 vets out a year with us. So it's been a lot of fun. It gives me a good excuse to stay in shape and to travel a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. And as two people who have gotten out of the military and gone through that process, I think you'd agree with me when I say that you're almost inundated with non-government organizations that help vets. And that's great. I love that those things exist, but they're mostly centered around finding jobs, finding a place to live, getting an education. And that all is 1000% necessary. But it's rare to find a veterans organization that is so unique and in such a niche hobby. And when I found out about this from Austin Hartman, I thought, oh, this of course this exists. It has to. This is amazing.
The original intent wasn't totally clear back in the day when it first started. And after our first trip, based off of what I've been told and then what I've seen since my years of working here, but just how it brings people together. I've made a lot of really close friends through the organization, leaders or not, and then other people come and say they're at the same skill level as someone else, and they're like, well, these are my goals, and they're like, whoa, dude, those are mine too. Like, let's get out next weekend and start working towards that. And so it's really cool to just see people meet and kind of grow that community, and then they take off on their own and do their own trips, which is great. And we want to see that. We want that kind of network, that community for people to have build friendships and whoa, we were in the Army, I was at this base at this time, and then next thing you know, they're out on their own doing a rock climbing weekend trip or whatever. So it's really cool to see and motivating to keep going when times are tough with the nonprofit side of things. Just seeing those relationships grow and build.
Yeah, that's perfect.
We have our first couple met through the trip, and then they got married, and the first VetEx baby, we wanted them to name it VetEx, but they decided not to.
That is so cool. Oh my God. That's like when companies, frame their first dollar and like hang it up.
Yeah.
You have your first wedding and baby.
Yeah.
That's cool. What led you to your position as field director then? Now we know you were a client, you had a great experience ice climbing. What was next?
Yeah, great question. So within the first few trips with the organization, I got invited to go climb Denali. And through various, training weekends, and then getting onto the mountain and spending a month with Nick and some of the other leader volunteer folks. At the end of that trip, we actually did that and then had a few days to kill, and then we did another 7 days on the Connecticut River in Alaska, where we float planed in, pumped up some rafts, and floated down the river catching fish for a week as an organization, with a couple vets were on the Denali trip, and then a couple new vets flew in for that trip.
That is cool.
And so I had an incredible 7 weeks in Alaska. And at the end of that, I was like, Nick, what can I do to help out the organization? I just got, if you tried to monetize it, like $30,000 probably worth of adventure for very minimal costs on me. So I was just like, what can I do to help out and support the organization? And started volunteering heavily from there, with leading, weekend rock climbing trips or backpacking trips, some of those easy type of things. And through the organization, I've made a lot of close friends, and we've done personal trips to climb some technical routes on like Rainier or Mount Stewart or something like that. And so made a lot of close friends, but also gained a ton of experience. And so now I can take my experience and then put it into the organization to lead some more like advanced trips, such as climbing Rainier and Hood. And
how do you gain the attention of the executive director of the program? Did he just walk up to you and say, "Hey, come on Denali," or like, what happened there?
Yeah, essentially, I came on literally 2 trips. I went to Ouray, Colorado, to ice climb for a weekend, and then the very next trip I went on was like a mountaineering training weekend. It was like learn to do crevasse rescue and walk as a rope team, ascend fixed lines. It was essentially like a screening for like a tryout for Denali, but we didn't know that that's what it was.
Okay.
And Nick was the 2014 National Geographic Adventurer of the Year for the nonprofit category.
Okay.
So Nat Geo was doing a piece on the organization, and they had the photographer and interviewer on the trip that weekend.
Wow.
So it was really, I was like, whoa, we're going to have our photos and Nat Geo, and it's really cool and also kind of crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, at the end of that weekend, I think Nick just wanted to see if my personality would mesh well with the other folks that he was already thinking of going on the trip. And we were shaking hands goodbye at the end of the trip, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing next summer? Are you going to come on Denali?" So,
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, this is a high pointing podcast, and while I do want to spend most of the episode focusing on your organization, I can't just brush over the fact that you did summit the highest point in all 50 states, and something that a lot of my listeners, it's a goal, and some of the listeners have done it. Can you talk about that expedition? It's not easy. I know that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy in that I was invited after basically like one training trip to go climb the North America's tallest peak. And the Kahiltna Glacier was the first time I'd ever stepped foot on a glacier before too, which is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in Alaska is just so big, and the glaciers are so big, and then the crevasses are so big, and so I mentally prepared for walking over these snow bridges, but pretty mind-boggling when you're walking over these crevasses that are hundreds of feet deep and 50, 60, 80 feet wide, and it's pretty crazy. So for the first several days, we're doing the double carry standard thing, working our way up the mountain, climb high, sleep low. By I don't know, day 7 or so, we were up at 14,000 feet, and then you kind of stage there and just wait for your weather window to go up to the summit. And we had about a 16-day bad weather spell, mostly just really high winds up on the summit ridges, and so it was pretty comfortable down in camp at 14,000 feet and protected, but you couldn't go up too high because there were 60, 70 mile an hour wind gusts and things like that. So we just hung out in 14 camp and threw football and made up stupid games to kill the time, read books, and then we finally got our weather window and made it to the top, I think, on day 25 of the trip, and then we were ready for burgers and beer and headed back down as fast as we could to get to Kahiltna, or the airstrip, and
right
back to Talkeetna.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So were there other people on the mountain that also waited 16 days, or was it just you guys?
Yeah, I mean, some did for sure, and it's pretty funny. We actually made friends with these two guys, one from Australia, one from Wales, and they were both military vets, and they were climbing a technical route up Denali, but they were pretty dirtbag climber type folks. So they actually they climbed the Cassine Ridge and then came back down to 14 camp right at the same time as we did. And they're like, well, we have 6 days left of food. We're poor, so let's just stay on the mountain for another 6 days so we don't have to buy food in Talkeetna. We were over that. We were ready to go spend the money on their view. But I still keep in contact with those guys because that's a big goal of mine, to get back on that mountain. And so been trying to plan out logistics for trying to go back to Denali.
Now, that's one thing I don't hear a lot of people say in the podcast is, I want to go back to Denali after you've already summited. Everyone's like, that's it. I'm never going back. That was such a slog. The only reason they want to go back is if they didn't summit. Right.
Yeah, I want to go back to summit again via another route. So
it's
been a big dream of mine for sure.
Now, what makes veterans expeditions unique is obviously the fact that you're all veterans and you're all on these expeditions. But can you talk more about that community that you take up on these trips?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a little bit of private guiding for a company out in Aspen, Colorado, and I get a taste of that side of things within the guiding world. And maybe it's just because it's high. Different clientele in Aspen specifically, but sometimes. But the expectation as a paid guide is to do a lot more of the labor and work. And what I appreciate about with the veterans expeditions clientele typically is that everyone's just on the same level playing field, and maybe I have more experience in the mountain climbing sense, I guess. But everyone's like, how can I pitch in and help? And can I cook dinner? Can I clean the dishes? And you don't normally get that with paid clientele through a for-profit guiding service. They want to be a little more pampered and taken care of since they're paying a lot of money.
Sure.
And within veterans expeditions, all the folks that come on trips always volunteer to, what can I do to help out? And I really love that community. We all just know how to work hard. I think the military has definitely ingrained that into everyone's minds that's been through that, is teamwork and work hard ethic. So everyone just jumps in, which is a great bond. It creates definitely a strong bond. And so a lot of people will exchange phone numbers with each other, and myself included, and be like, hey, I'm free in 3 weekends from now, like let's go for a ski tour or a rock climb or whatever it may be. And it's just not a veterans expeditions trip at all, but they're just good people to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I climbed Rainier a couple years ago with IMG. And this was like right after I got back from Iraq. And I remember we got up to Camp Muir and, they said, this is where we're going to sleep for the night. Just put your stuff down, chill, do whatever you want. And then dinner's going to be at this time. And I just assumed like we're all going to pitch in for dinner. And so I go into this little hut and I just start sleeping because I'm like, oh, I'm tired. My sleeping bag, I'll just lay it out. There's a little shelf here that I can sleep on. And I slept and I woke up and went into the dinner tent and just told everyone like, yeah, I just took this awesome nap. It was so great. And the guys were like, oh, we're so happy that you were able to sleep. It's so important to get this sleep on the mountains. I'm like, hold on. You're happy that I slept? Like this is celebrated? I'm not used to this at all.
Yeah.
And then it just felt weird getting cooked for. And then they clean up after you and everything. I'm like, yeah, this is not what I'm used to. But for the amount of money that I paid, I'm like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are based in Colorado. Can you talk about some of the trips that you've guided that are among your favorites?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely have some kind of core trips that we do every single year over and over again. They're big popular hits, and we can have large amounts of vets out on those trips. Just the logistics works well.
Mm-hmm.
And then each October, all the leadership gets together and we plan out the next year's schedule. So we have some trips that we repeat every year, and then the leaders get to pick like, hey, I'm really interested in climbing this mountain. So it's just a one-time thing, and we'll rotate some of those trips per year. But my two favorite trips that we do regularly are we do a weekend of camping in Moab, Utah.
Oh, cool.
And do rock climbing and mountain biking. And I run the rock climbing side of things, and then we have a couple of volunteers and Nick that do the mountain biking side of things. So we'll go out there for 3 nights and rock climb for 3 days, and it'll be 15-ish vets that'll go rock climbing, and then 15 or so vets that'll go mountain biking that weekend. So yeah, we'll have about 30 vets, and we'll all camp together. But during the day trips, through the day stuff, the groups will go their separate ways and do their whatever activity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a really laid back, fun weekend. We could do it over Veterans Day weekend. Kind of a way to celebrate the year and our service and just get together. And it's always just like a fun, laid back trip. There's no pressure on anybody to do anything crazy. It's just, let's just go goof off in the sandstones and Moab.
That's awesome.
And then the other trip is the ice climbing trip to Lake City. Again, we'll have 25 to 30 vets out with us, and just laid back trip, no pressure, but we get to go ice climb for 3 days, and I love ice climbing, so it's an easy favorite for me. But it's just so casual, and the ice climbing there is so accessible, and you can get as many laps in as you want. I do have a funny story. When we used to run this trip in Ouray, we had some Korean War vets out with us, and so they were old timers and wearing jeans and Carhartt jackets, and we're all in our like $1,000 Arc'teryx gear.
Right.
And Ouray is famous for their hot springs, so we climbed ice until like 2:30, and then we were like, all right, let's go to the hot springs and soak and relax. And these hard charger Korean War vets were like, no, why are we still have 3 hours until the ice park closes? Why are we going to leave now? I was just like blown away at their like psych and physical ability just to keep going. We were all so tired. It was impressive.
Oh, that's funny. Well, can you talk a little bit about the veteran demographics that you see participating in the expeditions?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority is the OIF, OEF veteran era for sure. We do, we've had Vietnam, Korean War, Gulf War, peacetime vets out with us. for sure. But with just I think the nature of the activities we do being pretty physical oftentimes, and the amount of just OEF vets, we attract for sure a lot of that. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's got to be around 85% being in that world. So
yeah,
but that,
and you get veterans from all branches, right?
Yep. Yeah. We haven't had any Space Force yet.
Just wait.
Yeah,
Aren't they based in Colorado? Or no, that's Florida. Never mind.
I think well, they have a base in Colorado Springs for sure. Maybe they're just on the Air Force base down there, but they definitely have a presence there.
Well, that's coming.
Yeah, we've had plenty of Navy and Coast Guard, and of course, Army and Marines and everybody. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we take any veteran or active duty, any era. So.
Yeah. So what are the qualifications that somebody needs to have?
Basically just a DD-214 or a active duty ID card. Mm-hmm. And then they can go on the website and just look at the schedule and sign up for a trip that they're interested in attending. Pretty simple.
Wow. Veterans located throughout the country can participate in these events, correct? Because you are running activities regionally.
Yeah, so we have a pretty big presence in the Pacific Northwest, and we have our home base is Colorado, but we have several volunteers throughout Utah as well. So Colorado and Utah, we have about half of our leadership there, and then we have some trips and leadership in kind of New York, New England area, and then the Mid-Atlantic and like the DC area. So we've got some trips out there. Our largest trip every year that we do is in Conway, New Hampshire to go ice climbing, and we'll have like around 50 vets on that. And the mountain, I think their National Guard will use that weekend as like their training for the weekend, their weekend training. So they'll come out, and it's pretty funny because they always have to climb in uniform and do it all official, but we get to make fun of all the privates and whatnot. But so they're not active duty, but they're using our trip as their training, and they just get to basically come out and ice climb for the weekend, which is cool. And then we are working on growing, and it's we're always trying to grow, but working on growing our kind of presence in the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast region. So we're going to run mountain biking and rock climbing trip, hopefully annually, in the Brevard, Looking Glass kind of area, Pisgah area, North Carolina. So we kind of ran some logistical trials this past spring, and hoping to make that like an annual trip and just slowly grow our leadership there. And a lot of times if we're working on growing a region, we just Nick or I will go run a trip or two down there and see who it attracts, and then if there's some competent folks that come out to attend that trip, we'll see if they're interested in helping us out as an organization and volunteer to run a trip or two. And but we always want to know them personally and make sure they know what they're doing and fit kind of the vibe of the organization, essentially.
Of course.
Yeah, so we're working on that kind of North Carolina, western part of North Carolina region, and could attract folks from all over the Southeast, hopefully.
For the listeners who are either active duty service members or veterans and want to somehow get involved with the organization, and the listeners who are not part of the veteran community but still want to donate and contribute to the organization, how can they do that?
Yeah, so active duty and vets can just go to our website, vetexpeditions.com, and go through our schedule. We still have a decent amount of trips this year, 2023.
Yeah, you do. I look through.
Yeah.
It looks fun.
And some are just single day trips around the Denver area to go mountain biking, and some are, winter camping in the Pacific Northwest or a trip for Veterans Day weekend. But yeah, it's as simple as clicking on the trip that looks interesting to you and going through that registration process, signing all the waivers and all that fun stuff. And we would love for anyone and everyone that can to learn more about the organization, and if you really like what we're doing, to donate if you can.
And you can do that on the website as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a donate now button on there.
Well, perfect. And I'm going to put a link to all of that in the show notes. And Nathan, thanks for being here. What you do is really, it's great for the veteran community. And thanks for what you do, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
All right, here with me now is Colton Ducken, who is a Marine Corps veteran and part of the Pacific Northwest team for Veterans Expeditions. Colton, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about your military background, and then we'll get into your role in Veterans Expeditions?
Sure. Yeah, I joined the Marine Corps in 2012 after college. I was commissioned a combat engineer officer, and for listeners who don't know what that is, it's we do a lot of demolitions and whatnot. So I was from there. I was stationed in Japan for a few years. Stationed in North Carolina after that. Did some deployments to Afghanistan and all over the place, really, in Asia as well. And then I ended up getting out of the Marine Corps in 2022, so only a year ago. So kind of fresh out. So that's kind of my Marine Corps career in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's awesome. So were you always into the outdoors? Now, I know that you were born and raised in Washington, so kind of around the Cascade Mountain Range. Were you always into the outdoors, or was that something that you got into once you got out of the Marines?
I was always into the outdoors, but I think you grew up spoiled, and especially where I grew up. I grew up in Enumclaw, Washington. So like Mount Rainier, it's Enumclaw, for anyone unfamiliar, it's the last stop you hit before you get up to the Cascades and go to Crystal Mountain for skiing or whatnot. So you were literally in the shadow of Mount Rainier. So I just grew up kind of spoiled, I think. And growing up in high school, I was going in the outdoors, but never really kind of got into climbing or anything like that, because it was always just there. And it took me joining the Marine Corps and moving away and being away from home to kind of realize, like, wow, like I really missed that stuff. So, towards the end of my Marine Corps career, I got more into climbing. And then when I got out, now I'm back home in Washington. So I spent a lot of time, doing more climbing and mountaineering stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. Did you climb any of the peaks in the Cascades before you left for the Marines?
No, I did a lot of hiking, but in terms of, actually summits, no, I was pretty casual outdoorsman, I'd say. Yeah. So
Yeah.
It took me leaving the beauty of the Cascades to realize what I was missing. So
Yeah, that's understandable. So how did you find out about VetEx?
man, I think that might have been social media, to be honest. So I had at the time in 2019, I had started taking some courses through American Alpine Institute to get some training and get make sure I had the correct knowledge to be safe in the mountains and whatnot. So I was looking for more groups outdoor focused for climbing partners, and also just to get more involved in the outdoor community.
Yeah.
I just somehow stumbled upon them. Might have been Instagram or something like that. But yeah, from there, I looked at their website and found some trips and signed up, and I kind of spiraled from there.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you were looking for a community after you left the Marine Corps, and that's really big for veterans as they transition from the service into the civilian world. Do you come across a lot of clients in VetEx that are looking for that same community?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was one of them. Like that was, VetEx has played a huge role for me. As I mentioned, I'd recently just got out a year ago. So for me personally, it played a huge role in that transition out of the military and having a community and having that sense of community with fellow veterans. That's not really there anymore once you get out. So for me, it was a big deal, and it's certainly with a lot of people we take out. It's the same thing. Guys that have just recently got out and are looking to continue to be around like-minded individuals with similar experiences as them. And then even guys that have been out and gals that have been out for sometimes for a decade or more, and just kind of like drifted away from the veteran community and are looking to kind of reintegrate back into it. So yeah, most definitely it's been an awesome way for me and others to just stay connected and build community.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But really the biggest thing is, I would say, is we're all like-minded in that we have similar experiences from the military, but we're also, now that we're, out, or some people are still in, but we're really focused on getting outdoors, and we all really enjoy that in the community that specifically builds. So, I think it's easier to connect with someone, just because you're a veteran, you might not always connect with that person. I think just the fact that we all enjoy the same hobbies is key as well.
You're right. And it's not just the same hobbies, but it's also like the same goal and the challenge that some of these outdoor endeavors pose in your life. I think it takes a special person to really enjoy that kind of slog that it takes to go on a multi-day expedition up and down a mountain. And when you find a group of people that like that and thrive in that environment, I think that's so special. And you really got to harness that community as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. The type 2 fun lovers, right? And it's,
that's right.
Yeah, plenty of. I mean, there's nothing like a little bit of shared misery is what I used to tell my Marines to build camaraderie, right? A little bit of shared misery, but you learn to love that misery a bit. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that stems from the military, but also I think just climbers in general, just love that, love that type 2 fun. So it's addicting.
Right. So before you were a team member for the Pacific Northwest team in VetEx, were you ever a client?
Yeah. When I first heard about VetEx, that's when I checked out their website and signed up. I think, if I remember right, it was either Mount St. Helens or Mount Adams, one of the super basic Washington Cascade volcanoes. And I remember particularly the Mount St. Helens one was particularly brutal. It was a whiteout conditions. I think the temperatures were in the negatives, and I still had a blast. It was a good time. And from there, I just kept going on trips and got more involved, and eventually to the point where I inquired to get on the team. And yeah, so back to your original question, yes, I'd say around 3 times I'd signed up as a client to do various volcanoes in the Cascades range.
Wow. And so from that experience, did that make you want to become more involved?
Yeah, it was great meeting, again, just fellow vets that had, like-minded goals, and we're all just kind of looking to get outside and share in that misery and that type 2 fun, and get some summits in and some fun in and some good conversation. And I knew right away it was a great organization, and I wanted to be involved in any way I could. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So what's the process of becoming a leader for these expeditions?
I'm not sure if there's a specific process. I know for me, I think at a bare minimum, you have to show interest in the organization, right?
Of course.
The fact that I kept coming back for more, even after I think the first time, as I mentioned, the first time we went out, it was just brutal conditions, and I was still like, yeah, sign me up for more of this. Like, yeah. I don't mind. This is great. So, and then from there, I expressed interest, and the following year they said, yep, let's get you. What they called it was kind of like I guess you could call it like a leader in training. So I would go out on events where there were other leaders leading the trip, and I was kind of like the assistant. And so I think it was like a year's worth of kind of feeling me out,
Sure.
And then also for me to just get some trips underneath my belt. And after a year doing that, that's when I've been able to actually go out and plan my own trips. Lead them on my own and do all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, that was the process for me, at least.
Wow, that's great. So can you talk about some of the clients who sign up and go on trips with you? What are their expectations? What's the reality? And then can you talk about, after the expedition, kind of what are the changes that you see in clients?
Sure. Yeah. So the first part of your question, I would say, we always have to make clear that I'm not a guide, right? Like I have training certifications. I have the Wilderness First Responder. I have American Alpine Institute. They have the AMTL courses. For anyone that's unfamiliar, that's the Alpine Mountaineering Technical Leadership courses, and I've done some of that. So, but I'm not we make very clear we're not full on guides. So we're there to ultimately make the safety decisions. And we have experience. We've all done the mountains before, and we know the route, the navigation, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like I'm not a guide, so we have to make that clear. I'm not going to cook food for you. I'm not going to carry all your weight for you. I'm not a porter.
Yeah.
So this is going to be there's group gear and all that. So most of the time there's not that expectation for people, but sometimes we have to be like, hey, yeah, I'm not, we're not going to cook for you. Welcome to VetEx. So I think really the expectation that people come out is, one, to be with other veterans, and two, that they'll get a good shot at least getting to the summit. And, I think this last year I had 100% summit success rate. And that's, we always we definitely are trying to get to the summit or whatever the objective is. But at the end of the day, it's really more about just getting out with everyone and having community and good conversation. And that's ultimately what I and the other leaders try and foster that environment for our clients. So that's really the main goal. But so yeah, I think the biggest thing people are looking for is that sense of community and also a good shot at the summit, which I think we do a good job of providing both. Yeah, I would say, a lot of guys, a couple different ways you kind of see changes. Some people are really kind of unsure of their ability to do whatever the objective is. So there's certain objectives that we kind of vet and we're like, hey, you have to have certain experience to come on this. But other ones are more basic, but still strenuous enough to, where people might have issues. So sometimes people are, really just like, I'm not sure if I can do this. And it's really cool to watch those people. And if they, most of the time they'll make it to the summit, and it's cool to watch them kind of realize like what they're capable of on the mountain. And that's cool to watch happen. I'll also say that in terms of, the conversation that's had, a lot of times people are, pretty, especially on multi-day trips, you're going to have guys that have had, a lot of vets have, everyone's service is different, and some people have dealt with quite a lot. And, sometimes at the beginning of the trip, people are pretty guarded and whatnot, but by the end, especially after a few days, people really open up and, the conversations are good. And by the end, you just kind of feel like, I don't know, you feel like if you go out with, like, for example, I just did a Glacier Peak climb, and we took, there were 6 of us out there on that climb. And by the end, I felt like we were like all squad mates, like in the middle, like we were like, that was my squad, right? Because we all were, just joking with each other and talking about our experiences. And, but yeah, at the beginning, people I think are usually kind of feeling it out and, aren't very upfront. So yeah, those are the ways I kind of see changes over the trip.
That's great. Do they return for more expeditions?
Yeah, we have a lot of repeat clients. There's some guys that I would say that sign up for, at least for the Pacific Northwest trips, like 50 to 60% of them. Yeah, they just want to come out to all of them.
That's so cool.
So yeah, we have a lot of that, and we give people leave reviews, on Google, and they're. I think last time I looked, we're all 5 stars. So people usually say pretty good things and say they do it again. So some people just, specifically the Pacific Northwest trips, if they live in the area, I'd say they come around a lot more. But a lot of guys, for example, on Glacier Peak, we had 2 guys come in from the East Coast. One was a New York City firefighter, and one was a PhD student at the University of New Hampshire. Wow. And harder for them to come out. But even then, that one individual, the New York City firefighter, he's come out to the Pacific Northwest twice now. And this past year has made the flight all the way out from Brooklyn to us. So even that, we have repeat customers or clients that are flying from all over the country. So
wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So given the background of your clients, they've all been through military training of some sort, regardless of what branch they're coming from. Do you find that they're already physically fit for these expeditions?
The way we kind of do our trips, there's certain trips that we do a little more vetting for that are more technical. Okay. And so we're going to want, and so it's not just the technical skills, but it's the physical ability as well. So we kind of want to know that you're up to the challenge, right? So, but there's other times, the more beginner stuff that, some individuals might show up, less in shape than others. So I think generally, across the board, most people are in shape and ready to go. But what everyone does have across the board is like the mindset of like just being willing to put up with, whatever the weather throws at them, whatever, if they got blisters on their feet, you just push them through that, like all that kind of stuff. I think the military just instills in you an ability to put up with a lot. And so even individuals that maybe could be in better physical shape because it's been a while since they've been out of the military, they still have what it takes mentally. And honestly, that's the biggest key, is to have what it takes mentally. I've seen plenty of people that are physically able to do stuff and they quit mentally. Wow. Not on VetEx trips, I would say. On VetEx trips, you don't see people, they're not quitting mentally. They have the fortitude to get it done. So.
Wow. What's your favorite trip in the Pacific Northwest that you've guided?
Oh man, that's tough. I really enjoy Mount Shuxan. That one has just such a variety of terrain. You have the glacier travel, some of the routes, and sometimes you might encounter ice on it as well. And then the Summit Pyramid has like some fourth class rock that's fun to scramble up, and then you can rappel off, and that's always fun to do some rappels as well. So. And it's not super technical climb, so you can get it's pretty available for a wide range of people that want to go on that one. So I think they call Mount Shuxan the crown jewel of the Cascades, and they say it for a reason. Just not only that, it's a cool climb, it's just beautiful. It's got the hanging glaciers on it, and you have Mount Baker right across the valley that you get to look at as you go up, and it's just beautiful up there. So that's probably my favorite.
Yeah,
so far.
And I saw that the Mount Baker guided summit is coming up this year for Veterans Day. Is that correct?
On Veterans Day, I think there is a trip that's being ran in the Mount Baker area. It's not to the summit of Mount Baker, but you are correct that, there's you forgive me if I don't know the details. I'm not going out on that one, but it is a trip in the Mount Baker area. It's the focus of that trip is kind of winter backpacking.
Awesome.
And so to get some experience doing that. But we already did a Mount Baker summit. I think it was back in June or early July. So that I was not on that one. I was on the one last year. But both this past 2 years we've done Baker guided Baker trips, and they both were successful and great times. So.
Yeah. So for any veterans who are listening, what do you want them to know about veterans expeditions?
I would say if you're looking to get into the outdoors or get into, check us out. If you want to get into the outdoors, check us out. If you're already into the outdoors and just looking to get plugged into with other veterans that are also outdoor minded, check us out. So I all the trips I've been on, I focus on the Pacific Northwest, and we're very mountaineering focused, but we're looking to expand kind of the activities that we do in the future, to include mountain biking, some kayaking, stuff like that. But I would say look other chapters on the East Coast and in Colorado. They do all sorts of different activities. So if it's not mountaineering you're interested in, if you're interested in say mountain biking or any other kind of outdoor activities, just check us out. There's something there for everybody. So
right. And for the listeners, Colton is focused on the Pacific Northwest region. That's obviously where he's living. But Veterans Expeditions has expeditions throughout the country. So I'm in North Carolina, for example. I think they have a ton of stuff out on the East Coast. There are regional team leaders within Veterans Expeditions. So it's not just the Pacific Northwest. We were just lucky enough to get Colton on the show to talk about his experience leading in the Cascades. So couple last questions. How has the outdoors enriched your life personally?
Well, for me, I don't know why, but I've never had a bad day on the mountains. Even if I get caught in a whiteout and it's miserable conditions or something like that, the worst day on the mountain is by far better than the best day in my opinion. Just sitting at home or sitting at the desk. So for me, it's where I feel most alive. And then honestly, in terms of the specific activities of climbing or mountaineering, for me, it's kind of makes me grow, makes me push myself mentally, physically, and then also technically having to learn new skills. It's just a way to keep myself sharp physically, mentally, and kind of just growing as well, because you just have to continue in order to continue to do more and more in more different routes, more complex routes. You just got to continue learning as well. So I like that aspect too. So there's nothing like it. Like I said, I mean, even the best day at home or the best day at office pales in comparison to the worst day on the mountain. Like again, for me, there's obviously there's risk and whatnot, and sometimes things can go bad. But for the most part, there's no bad days on the mountains.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite mountain?
Oh man, I don't know. That's I'm not. So I know this is a high pointer podcast. I wouldn't call myself a high pointer, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I've done. I think Hood and Rainier are the two high points I've done. I really just love Mount Shucksand, to be honest. I really do. I've done the Fisher Chimney route, which is, even though, backing up, even though Mount Shucksand's I'm not sure what number it is on the list of tallest mountains in Washington. For me, it's just the terrain that it offers, the variety of terrain that you're going to face. So the Fisher Chimney route, there's a lot of, fourth class scrambling, some steep snow, sometimes steep ice, depending on the time of year. Some pretty awesome glacier travel over some hanging glaciers. So for me, I really just like if there's a diversity of terrain that you encounter, and then, if the mountain itself is pretty aesthetic, that's always nice too, right? So I'm a fan of Mount Shucksand, but honestly, like there's so many that I enjoy. So pretty much anything in the Cascades, I'm a huge fan of. Yeah.
Have you ever read any of Fred Becky's books?
Oh yeah. If you're a Pacific Northwest native and you call yourself a climber in any sense, if you're not educated on Becky, then what are you doing? All of his guidebooks are still, that's like kind of the standard book for a lot of climbers in the region. I think it's broken up into 3 or 4 different regions, but those are bread and butter for climbers still to this day, even though some of the stuff that he's written in those books are decades and decades and decades old.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a fascinating guy, and what a really cool life he led. Although it was, full of color and controversy, it's a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah. Legend. Absolute legend. Yeah. You can't throw a rock in any direction in the Cascades without hitting a route called the Becky route. Like especially, you asked me what my favorite mountain is. My favorite area is the North Cascades, kind of Washington Pass area.
Okay.
And you can't throw. I mean, there's a Becky route on every single mountain out there, because he just, back in the 40s and 50s, he would just bushwhacked out there with his brother and then did first ascents on everything. So it's pretty inspiring.
Well, what I liked about his life, and I watched that documentary, Dirtbag: The Legend of Fred Becky, was that it didn't really seem like something he was trying to gain notoriety for. It was just his way of life, and that's just how he lived, and he didn't understand why he wouldn't live like that.
Yeah, I love the fact that he was a climbing purist, right? Like it wasn't, wasn't getting rich. Definitely never got rich off it. Never maybe, got some fame and whatnot. But I think he just enjoyed doing it. And that's it. And I think that's, it wasn't about notches on his belt or anything, or it was just the experience and just being out there. You're right. Being out there climbing.
Yeah, and I've read a couple of his books, and he's such a good writer. And when you listen to him talk, it doesn't really line up. You wouldn't expect him to be as eloquent of a writer as he is based on how he talks, but just very, very talented in that regard. Absolutely, yeah, great writer, and like his ability to remember details, and that's why his books that he wrote and the beta that he wrote down are still used today, because it was so detailed. Wow. And also his ability to convert it into sketches, like very accurate sketches as well. So just a brilliant guy. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's super interesting. Well, if any of the listeners want to give back to Veterans Expeditions, whether they want to donate or become involved somehow, how can they do that? Yeah, so go to our website. There's links on there to donate, and that money goes to help run some of these trips.
But really, I would say just, and if you the best way to give back is to get involved too. Just come out on a trip and experience it for yourself. And I guarantee you'll have a good time. You won't regret it.
That's awesome. Well, Colton, thanks for doing this. It's a lot of fun, and I hope to get on an expedition one of these days.
Hope to see you out there. Yeah, it'd be great. You'll have a good time.